Welcome to Dark 10. Today, we're going to go over top 10 dangerous serial killers. Make sure to watch until number 1, because it's one of the most dangerous serial killer I've ever seen. 10. Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells had been a serial killer who lived from June 28, 1964, to April 3, 2014. Born in California, U.S. Sells was convicted with one killing and given the death penalty, for which he was subsequently hanged. Authorities suspect he was responsible for 22 murders. When Sells and his twin sister, Tammy Jean, were 18 months old, they acquired meningitis. Tammy died as a result of the disease. Sells was moved to live with his aunt, Bonnie Walpole, in Holcomb, Missouri, shortly after. He was returned to his mother when he was 5 years old when his aunt expressed an incentive to adopt him. Sells stated that while he was 8 years old, he began spending time with Willis Clark, who began molesting him with his mother's permission. This abuse, according to Sells, had a significant impact on him, and he would replay his events while performing his acts. 9. Green River Killer. Gary Leon Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, is an American serial killer. He was initially found guilty of 48 murders. Another conviction was added, bringing the total number of convictions to 49, making him the second most prodigious serial killer in U.S. history, based on verified killings. He murdered several girls and women 1980s and 1990s. Many of Ridgway's victims were underage sex workers. After his identity was revealed, the press nicknamed him the Green River Killer. He generally strangled his victims, with either hands or ligatures. He would strangle them, then leave their bodies where they were so that he could have sex with them afterward. In 2001, Ridgway, a truck factory worker, was detained for the killings of 4 women proven via DNA profiling evidence. To earn himself a lighter sentence, he revealed the locations of all the missing women. 8. Butcher of Plainfield. Edward Theodore Gain, also known as the Plainfield Ghoul, was an American murderer and body snatcher. Due to the notoriety his crimes generated, law enforcement discovered that Gain had removed corpses from nearby graveyards and had fashioned trophies and keepsakes from their bones and skin. He was placed in a mental hospital and found unable to face charges. In 1968, he was found convicted of the murder of Worden, but he has been found mentally ill and was placed in a psych facility. Due to respiratory failure, he passed away at Mendota Mental Health Institute on the 26th of July 1984. 7. Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness was a Norwegian-American serial killer active in Illinois and Indiana between 1884 and 1908. Reports claim that Gunness may have murdered between 14 and 40 people, all of whom were men who came to her rural Indiana property in hopes of marriage. People widely believe that Gunness faked her death in a fire in 1908. Her fate is unknown. The parish found her confirmation in 1874. By age 14, she was milking and herding cattle in order to earn enough money to sail to New York. She moved to the U.S. in 1881. Upon processing in Castle Garden, she became Belle and then moved to Chicago to join her sister, Nellie, who had immigrated several years prior. While living with her sister and brother-in-law in Chicago, she first found employment as a domestic servant and later worked at a butcher's shop. 6. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was an American serial murderer, necrophile, kidnapper, rapist, and thief who abducted, raped, and killed countless young women and girls in the 1970s and maybe earlier. Finally, he admitted to committing 30 killings between 1974 and 1978, which spanned 7 states. It is possible that his real number of victims may be greater. Victims and society saw Bundy as attractive and personable, attributes that he utilized to succeed. He usually accosts his victims in public, pretending injuries or being a minor authority official, and knocks them unconscious before transporting them to remote spots to rape and strangle them. He revisited his victims and engaged in sexual practices with the rotting bodies, as long as the bodies were no longer attractive to animals. Several dozen victims were beheaded and stored as souvenirs in his residence. Occasionally, he would attack victims who were asleep, bludgeoning them to death. From 1975, Bundy was incarcerated in Utah for aggravated abduction and attempted criminal assault. 5. The Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez, born on 29 February 1960, was an American serial murderer, serial rapist, kidnapper, child abuser, and burglar. His youth in El Paso is said to impact his criminal activity. He eventually began sleeping at the nearby graveyard due to the bouts of the fury of his father. Ramirez the ways of his own military exploits and mistreatments while serving in Vietnam. Ramirez started taking LSD and developed an interest in Satanism. While his widely publicized house invasion and murder crime spree terrified the citizens of Greater Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area from June 1984 to August 1985, it also terrified other Californians until the crime spree ended. The weapons he employed included firearms, knives, a machete, and a hammer. The only problem with Ramirez's convictions was that they include 13 charges of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. The judge who found that Ramirez's sentencing of death met the cruel, callous, and vicious standards of human behavior said that his acts had shown depravity, inhumanity, and viciousness that went beyond the bounds of human comprehension. Despite apologizing for his misdeeds, Ramirez showed no signs of regret. 4. Fred Shipman. The English general practitioner Harold Frederick Shipman, born on 14 January 1946, known as Fred Shipman, was among the most prominent serial killers in recent history. He was considered as one of the English general practitioners. His number of victims had been above 250 by January 31, 2000, when he was convicted of murdering 15 patients. The court recommended that he never be freed after sentencing him to life imprisonment. His death occurred on January 13, 2004, when he hanged himself in his cell at Hum Prison, Wakefield, just before a day of his 58th birthday. 3. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Murderer Clown, was an American serial killer and child molester who committed at least 33 sexual assaults and murders over a 14-year period. He also performed as Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown at children's hospitals and charity events, identities he had developed. In addition, he was a precinct commander for the Democratic Party and a construction contractor. Recognized as the Killer Clown, killed all of his victims at his ranch home located in Norwood Park Township, a neighborhood in the city of Norridge, suburban Chicago, Illinois. He would often mislead someone into coming to his house by pretending to perform a magic trick, put shackles on their wrists, then rape and torture them before murdering them by asphyxiation or strangling with a garrote. He was responsible for the deaths of 26 people who were buried in his crawl space, plus 3 more who were buried somewhere else on his land. 2. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Alonso Lopez, born on 8 October 1948, is a Colombian serial murderer and child murderer, who was condemned to death for murdering 110 girls, but who claims to have raped and murdered at least 300 girls. As Lopez's crimes were not sourced, news of them first reached a worldwide audience when Ron Leitner interviewed Lopez in the Ambato jail cell where he was incarcerated in 1980. Although he was incarcerated for auto theft, Lopez said that he was ruthlessly gang raped while in jail and that he tracked down and murdered all of his attackers once he was released. He alleged that after serving time in jail, he immigrated to Peru and began killing girls under the age of 10. The majority of murders committed by Pedro Lopez were reported to have taken place in 1978 when he was apprehended by members of an indigenous group. When a Christian missionary from the U.S. came to his rescue, these kidnappers decided to turn him over to the police department. 1. Jack the Ripper. One of London's most infamous serial killers, the Jack the Ripper, targeted underprivileged communities in and around the Whitechapel neighborhood of London during the latter half of the 1800s. In contemporaneous media reports, the murderer was known as the Whitechapel Murderer, also known as the Leather Apron. People of East End slums were common for Jack the Ripper's victims. Prior to the abdominal mutilations, their necks were severed. At least 3 of the victims' internal organs were removed, suggesting that the perpetrator had some medical or surgical competence. Fears grew that the killings were linked to one another in September and October of 1888, and several letters claiming to be the killer were sent to media outlets in Scotland Yard. The letter written by the alleged Jack the Ripper and distributed in the media was responsible for the term, Jack the Ripper, coming into use. Subscribe Dark 10 and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos of creepy, interesting, or scary facts and much more. Check out this playlist of my Dark 10 videos of crime and killers and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.